David had always considered himself an average guy. He wasn't unattractive, but he certainly didn't expect to match with someone like Hazel. She was stunning, long blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could light up a room. When she swiped right on him, he couldn't believe his luck. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, and it wasn't long before Hazel suggested they meet up. Hazel seemed eager, maybe even a bit too eager, to meet David in person. She invited him to her home, claiming she preferred the intimacy and privacy of her own space over a crowded bar or cafe. David, blinded by excitement and infatuation, agreed without hesitation. Her address led him to a remote part of town, far from the bustling city center. As he drove deeper into the deserted area, unease began to creep in. The houses grew older and fewer in number, and soon he found himself in front of an old, dilapidated house. It looked abandoned, but the lights were on. David knocked on the door, his heart pounding in anticipation. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. He stepped inside, calling out for Hazel. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind him, and a chilling silence filled the air. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw someone standing at the end of the hallway. But it wasn't Hazel. He was a man tall, gaunt, with a sinister grin that sent shivers down David's spine. Realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He had been catfished. David's instincts screamed at him to run. He turned and bolted towards the door, but the man was fast, too fast. A chase ensued through the old house, with David dodging through rooms and hallways, desperately trying to find an exit. He could hear the man's footsteps close behind, his breath hot on David's neck. At one point, David hid in a closet, holding his breath as the man passed by, muttering to himself. David could see the madness in his eyes through the slats of the closet door. Just when he thought he was safe, the man doubled back, ripping the closet door open and grabbing David. David fought with all his strength, managing to break free and run outside. He jumped into his car, fumbling with the keys in his panic. The man burst through the front door, sprinting towards the car. David started the engine just in time, flooring the gas pedal and speeding down the deserted road. His rearview mirror showed the man chasing him on foot, his speed unnaturally fast. David's heart raced as he swerved around corners, trying to lose his pursuer. At one point, he nearly crashed into a tree, but he managed to regain control. David drove straight to the nearest police station, breathless and terrified. He recounted his harrowing experience, but when the police went to investigate, the house was empty. There was no sign of the man, no evidence of the struggle. It was as if the whole thing had been a bad dream. The police assured David they would keep an eye out, but days turned into weeks with no leads. The man had vanished without a trace, leaving David to grapple with the psychological scars of his encounter. For weeks, David lived in constant fear, looking over his shoulder, jumping at every sound. He couldn't shake the feeling that the man was still out there, watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike again. One evening, David was at home when he heard a faint tapping on his window. His blood ran cold as he recognized the sinister grin of the man outside. Panic surged through him, and he quickly called the police. But by the time they arrived, the man was gone. The police took his report seriously this time, setting up patrols in his neighborhood. David tried to go about his life, but he knew the man was still out there, lurking in the shadows. Days turned into weeks, and David's nerves were constantly on edge. He began noticing small things, footprints in his garden. His trash cans moved, a shadow disappearing around the corner. The man was taunting him, letting him know he was never far away. David's friends urged him to move, to get away from the area, but he felt trapped. He didn't want to uproot his life, and he believed the police would eventually catch the man. But the encounters grew more frequent and more brazen. One night, David was woken by the sound of breaking glass. He rushed to his living room to find the man standing there, a shattered window behind him. The man's grin was wider than ever, his eyes gleaming with madness. David grabbed a nearby lamp and swung it at the man, but he dodged easily, laughing. David ran upstairs, locking himself in his bedroom and barricading the door. He could hear the man downstairs, calmly walking through his house, taunting him. David called the police, his hands shaking so badly he could barely dial. The wait for the sirens felt like an eternity. When they finally arrived, the man was gone, leaving behind a house in disarray and a chilling message scrawled on the wall. "I'm always watching." David couldn't take it anymore. He packed his bags and decided to leave town. But the man was one step ahead. As David loaded his car, he felt a presence behind him. He turned to see the man standing there, holding a knife. David's blood ran cold. He tried to run, but the man was too quick. A struggle ensued, and David was slashed across the arm. He managed to break free and jumped into his car, blood dripping onto the seat as he started the engine. The chase was on again, but this time it was different. The man had a car and was right on David's tail. They sped through the deserted streets, the man's car ramming into David's, trying to force him off the road. David's vision blurred from the blood loss, but he couldn't stop. He pushed his car to the limit, taking sharp turns, trying to lose his pursuer. He could hear the man's maniacal laughter, growing louder and more frenzied. David glanced at his fuel gauge and his heart sank. He was running low on gas. Panic set in as he realized he couldn't keep this up much longer. He saw a chance and took it, turning sharply onto a dirt road that led into the woods. His car bounced and skidded, but he managed to stay ahead. The man's car was right behind him, headlights glaring in the rearview mirror. As the car sputtered and slowed, David knew he had no choice. He slammed on the brakes, jumping out of the car and running into the thick forest. He could hear the man close behind, crashing through the underbrush. David stumbled through the darkness, every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs making his heart race. He saw an old, abandoned cabin up ahead. He ran inside, slamming the door behind him. He found a rusty old shotgun in the cabin, but there were no shells. Desperation clawed at him as he searched for anything to defend himself. The man was close. David could hear his footsteps outside. David hid in the darkness, clutching a broken piece of wood as his only weapon. The door creaked open and the man stepped inside, his eyes gleaming with sadistic pleasure. The final confrontation was brutal. David swung the piece of wood with all his might, striking the man and knocking him to the ground. But the man was relentless, grabbing David's leg and pulling him down. They wrestled on the floor, the man trying to stab David with the knife. David fought with every ounce of strength he had left. He managed to kick the knife out of the man's hand and scrambled to his feet. The man lunged at him, and David swung the wood again, hitting him in the head. The man staggered, but didn't go down. In a final, desperate move, David grabbed a heavy piece of debris and brought it down on the man's head. The man collapsed, unconscious or worse. David didn't wait to find out. He ran from the cabin, adrenaline the only thing keeping him moving. David's escape through the woods was a nightmare. He was weak from blood loss, disoriented, and terrified the man would wake up and come after him again. He stumbled through the darkness, every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs making his heart race. Hours later, he emerged on the other side of the woods, collapsing on the road. A passing car found him and took him to the hospital. He was barely conscious, muttering about the man and the nightmare he had lived through. David woke up in the hospital, bandaged and weak. The police were there, eager to hear his story. They went back to the cabin, but the man was gone. There was no sign of him, no trace he had ever been there. David knew he had to get far away. He moved to a different city, changed his name, and tried to start over. But the psychological scars remained. He lived in constant fear, always looking over his shoulder, always waiting for the day the man would find him again. He knew he would carry the terror of that night with him for the rest of his life. David's story is a chilling reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind a seemingly innocent online profile. Always be cautious when meeting someone new, especially if it seems too good to be true. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more spine-chilling content. Until next time, stay safe and stay spooky.